And let's start with the first question. So the first question is question about EEGB scheduler versus Java EE batch processing. And what are pros and cons when using batch processing over EEGB scheduler? So to be honest, I usually start with a scheduler. So what scheduler is just an EEGB which is executed periodically. So you can set basically cron expressions, and the cron expressions are cause a method annotated with the cron expression with the annotation at schedule to be executing, and this basically is. So what you can do, you can start jobs at night, jobs invoke methods at night, but there is no retry, no parallel processing, and no monitoring. But still, we implement a lot of stuff using basic schedule. So and what Java EE batch actually is. So I implemented a few years ago a very simple example, and would like to show you the example. So this is the batch log processor, and the batch log processor is just reads Glassfish log files and processes them, and it is a part of the Java EE batch specification. So it starts with job controller, which can be configured by application server and XML. You can see you can set properties. You are starting the batch processor, and usually what you have a reader writer on processor, and I even implemented a partitioner where you can specify the parallel behavior, and I can read logs and analyze them. This is the reader, and there is a writer which writes the logs out, and we have a seeker, which is actually the processor, which in case it finds a warning in the log files, it does something about this. So you cannot really compare at scheduler with EEGB with batch. Batch is more complete solution, and if you have lots of data to process and you would like to to restart the jobs, I think the batch log processor is the way to go. Having said that, I actually this year I was several times asked about implement a Java EE batch solution, and we end up using just straight Java 8 with Java EE, and it worked really well. So just I would start with at schedule, and if you miss some functionality, go to the Java EE to the Java EE batch processor specification. I hope the answer is clear. Okay, the next one. Questions about multi-data source and EEGB. This is actually what I do right now in my project. So I have to access different environments from EEGBs on a host system. Actually 4 different environments, and they are not only data sources. They are the whole configuration is actually different. But I actually really need a data source for this. So how to do this? It is really simple. So I don't know whether I will start hacking or not. So usually you would use, if you know the data sources up front, what is case in my project, I just used a CDI bean and injected whatever I knew to the CDI bean. So all the environments with at resource and name. So I specified the name, and it was just basically injected, and then. It probably is I think it is easier or faster to implement. So I would just start with project with archetype, and this is I would use again my own archetype, and it should be workspaces and the legendary junk folder, and multi data source, multi-DS. Let's call it multi-DS. So the basic idea would be. And this is actually what happens. The project has, in my case, a JAX-STOR as endpoint, and I get the environment from the user. So just to create the backend, so I will implement a class and call the class a data source selector. That's actually a nice name. Always choose cool names. Airhex DS. So and basically what I did is I did something like this: add resource. And this is where you can inject the data sources and specify the name or map name, JDBC sample. So there is I think I use map name. This is the actual JNDI name. Data source data source, the wrong one. Data source, this one. This is the default one, default source, default DS, and we have a, or default, there is no default. The one is the def DS, and the other one is, let's say, prod DS, and of course they have different injected names. So, and what I did then is a method which exposed the data source, exposed produces data source, and here you can use, for instance, here the current DS, and the current is something produced depending on, let's say, on the principal name or any given context. So this is produced somewhere else, and if you cannot produce this, then you just call the method data source exposed, and I will rename it to get, and you will get the data source. So actually what you will end up having is here a switch case and return the data source. What you can of course do, you can select the data sources on the fly. So you can just use initial context and lookup, but I think this is more robust because this is evaluated at the beginning. You can even put it to a startup singleton, so all the data sources are injected at the beginning and expose them depending on what, on let's say stage. For instance, you can use the Java server faces project stage, and depending on this, you can produce different data sources and inject the data sources to the user. Then let's make it at least compilable. So this is you could also of course use how it's called, invocation target, injection point, I think, injection point, or you can use depending on names or whatever, and I will just return the prod DS. And now what I can do, I can inject this using just ordinary @inject. So I would have an ordinary EJB. This is a boundary, and the boundary is an EJB. Stateless is an EJB, and I can just inject right now the data source without any annotations. And if you're already exposing the data sources with, then you, if it collides with something in your project, you will have to use your own qualifier, like, let's say, stage dependent. So I think it's clear. So what you can do, I would always prefer no magic behavior, so inject whatever you like using @resource. What you can do equally well using initial context and look up them, so dynamically, but this is less robust, and I think you should know what is configured in your server, because it is really hard to configure data sources on the fly, and yeah, I would never do this actually. So just inject whatever you know and select them using switch cases and expose them using produces. Then you can use @inject and inject whatever you like. I hope it's clear. See, any questions? So whether I get a response here from AOL. So regardless whether this XA data source or not, it actually doesn't matter. The data source is getting to be injected to an this is a depending resource, so it's going to be injected to EJBs, and then it happens to be XA data source. So I think it doesn't matter whether it is XA or not; it will just work. I hope it's clear. So it's nothing special here. So if you have no further questions, I will go on, because we have lots of stuff to cover. Oh, 2 questions already. Interceptors, I think why interceptors? There is actually no case to use interceptors. And should I use injection with the request scope? You don't have to, because if you're using EJBs, they're just injected to EJBs. So there is no need to use request scoped. Someone mentioned in a comment, you forgot to say one advantage of Spring over JUE. Spring you can deploy on any container, and this actually funny statement caused a lot of comments and a gist on GitHub. So it's somehow true, but first you should never deploy Spring on a Java EE server, because it's too much overlap. If you just look at @inject and producers and qualifier, most of the annotations were even designed by Ro Johnson anyway, so from Spring. So if you would just use Spring on Java EE, there's way too much overhead. So what I would do instead is, if you would like to run Spring, just run it on Tomcat or T-Server or something like this. So this works perfectly, and this is very similar to Java EE, so you can just do it. And another interesting part is if you just deploy whatever you like, Juice or whatever framework you like, you could even deploy Hibernate on Glassfish. Then you end up having Eclipselink and Hibernate. It would work. The question is why, right? So Hibernate would work on Glassfish, and you can say, okay, then I will omit the Eclipselink problems. But just your decision should be reasonable. And running Spring on Java EE server without additional requirements is not reasonable because it's too much overlap. So this is like using my comparison, Eclipselink and Hibernate at the same time on the same server. It does not make any sense within an application. And of course, if you consider this from the other way, so if you think, what happens if Spring has a problem, right? Is there any alternative where you can just migrate away from Spring to something else? Is it something comparable? So can deploy to any container on any container. I don't know what happens with Java 6 and Java 7. They are actually pretty portable. So what I actually do frequently right now, I switch between Glassfish, Whitefly, and Tommy in Java 6 a lot. In fact, my current project is Tommy. Sometimes I test it on Whitefly, and there are actually no issues. And where to expect issues? I would always expect issues in the persistence, but I think the injection would work everywhere. So yeah. But the Spring statements are always funny, always cause some discussion. So keep them coming, always fun. Oh, we have something on Twitter. Do we have something? Oh, we had on Twitter a parallel discussion whether Java is synchronous or not, and the Vertex guys. Had a nice statement about Java. It's like, I think generally Java is going the right direction. So this is what the response was. So what is actually nice. So we have parallel discussion on Twitter, which is highly appreciated. So I think we covered the how do you manage deployed microservices? Status, health check, restarting locally and on servers. So we have no time to cover microservices, but I will deliver some talks soon, and even one talk at Java User Group in Gdańsk, Danzig, and on conferences. So I will try to explain what is my understanding of the microservices. We could do it on next AirHacks, for instance. There is nothing to do. We could discuss microservices, and what I do is actually fully transparent because I do it on. It is already on GitHub. So I have a project to run Pink. I can run the project, and what it will do right now, it will deploy Pink on Whitefly. So, and Pink is just on war. So I can pink the application. So plus means it is running. So I can look what is actually installed on the server. This is the system properties. I can list the namespaces. The conf and namespace is empty because and global namespaces. And yeah, I have the boot time here. You see memory statistics. So the Whitefly uses right now 19 megabyte of RAM, and and this is what I use for basic monitoring, and this could be, and this is just technical pinging, you know, the application, and usually I expose more business data, like, you know, number of processed item per second or whatever. It's really easy with Java EE, and integrate this as well, because this is more or less meaningless. It's just whether the application is basically running, not actually whether it is well running, right? So, and I have a couple of this. Actually, all my microservices, nano services, femto services, whatever services have such a ping. And what I did, I created a corresponding project. The name is, of course, Floyd. And the Floyd is a JavaFX application. And what I can do with Floyd is I can say, where is the Floyd? Come on, Floyd. So I just built everything with Maven and just recreated from scratch the whole application, built, of course, with Afterburner 8070. I can actually scan all the ports. And what it did, it found the application running here, and it will create a tab per application, so I can refresh and see, you know, the ping times. And what I also experimented with is I could create this is still in the making, some thresholds. Let's say if the ping time decreases or the load average somehow gets a problems, then I can create alerts or something like this. But this I'm using for basic management. And I created a watchdog.org. If you go to watchdog, you can monitor your local. It's not running your local Docker service, and this is just to see what containers are running. So this is what I actually using in my leisure, and what I'm doing on my clients is, I mean, a little bit problematic because there are lots of NDAs, but I would say large companies have the infrastructure anyway, so they have something like Nagios, GMX or whatever. And smaller companies, we build something more pragmatic, but this is very similar what we do right now here. And if you remember the Lightfish project, just go to my GitHub account, Lightfish project, does something similar. It exposes a lot of statistics where and stores them in the database. So I see over time what the application server is doing. This is what I actually do to manage my own microservices. And this is also what I suggest to my clients. And lots of my clients is something similar. Yeah. Okay, I hope it is clear. No questions? Perfect. So let's see the next point. How do I use Docker? What setup locally on servers? So I can show you this right now. So also funny statement. So actually I used Docker for over 1 year. I think I started with 0.4 or something on my server. Works well, but no one was interested in Docker 1 year before, and now it just took off. So, so first, I have a base image, and in this base image, as you can see, it's based on Fedora F20. So it is actually, yeah, it should be about several month old image, but still works well. So I create whatever I like, OpenSSH, whatever I need. As you can see, I also have a top secret password here, and you can see I can add and ping war to each image. So it's just part of the whole thing. And I'm using JDK 1.8 everywhere. And what I also do, I link to JGS because I need Nashorn for automation. And if you look, for instance, on my blog, it runs on Tommy 1.6 plus and waiting for Tommy 2.0. It will be Java 7 or more interestingly, X-Ray. So it runs on Whitefly 8.1.0. It was Glassfish 4.0 earlier, so there was actually no big deal just to deploy the application on Glassfish. And so I'm just creating manually the image and then exposing the ports and starting the Whitefly. And I have lots of scripts with some conventions to start this, and I'm lots of the scripts I've written in Nashorn because it's easier as in JavaScript. And what's also interesting, I have here continuous deployment setup. And what it actually is, it is Jenkins, which runs in a container but talks to the Docker instance, and it manages all the other images. So, so it's something like a meta container which automates the creation of all other images. And the whole thing here is stored in a Git repository. This is not optimal, but very, very simple to use. So everything I do here is in Git, and then I pull the changes to the server. So I will move to a Docker registry, but this is what I do right now. I just synchronize both machines with Git. So I have exactly the same image on my machine as on a server, so there's no difference. And this runs for over 1 year. And prior to this, it was based on KVM, and prior to this was based on Oracle VM. So this is what I always did, and for unknown reasons, Docker just took off, which is actually nice. So now I can talk at conferences what I'm actually doing in my leisure. Okay, this is what I do, and this I will probably write some blog posts about the Docker. I thought it's not interesting enough, but yeah, if you ask for this, you can get some posts. Okay, so I think we manage Docker. And why Docker is so exciting for those of you who never heard about Docker? Docker is a mix of, think about Docker like virtualization, but crazy fast. It's actually a process running on a Unix, on a Linux server. So and it's actually old story. What Docker is like Solaris zones or BSD jails is actually a very similar technology, but on Linux based on LXC Linux containers. And what's also nice, it comes with copy and write file system, I think. So it is like any change you do to the image are versioned, and you can refer to the changes. So it's really easy to to go to the recent version or to the current version. And the Docker comes with a build system, which is actually this. So you can build your own images and pass the images to the server and stuff like this. So it's, I would say, a mix of Maven, Git, and very fast visualization. But at the end of the day, nothing new, but very usable. I think the usability is key point here in Docker. Back then, with Oracle VM or with KVM, it took minutes to start up an image. And Docker, the same thing takes seconds. So I hope you are now Dockerized. This was the question about Docker. So the old question, does JSF play well with JavaScript frameworks? Of course. And this is a recurring question somehow. You have to be careful if you ask such a question. The question should be rather, if I'm using prime faces, could I use, I don't know, jQuery on top or something like this? So, plain JSF will always work well with JavaScript or CSS frameworks, because there is, nothing which is more sophisticated, just plain components. You can do whatever you like. And in fact, we do it a lot. So we combine JSF with Foundation or Bootstrap. It just works out of the box. It's actually no problem. There's actually even, I think it's called Angular Faces. So there is actually a project meant to combine, Angular Faces, for instance. We just paste it to. It's a project which helps to migrate from JSF back to Angular or whatever. So there's a lots of projects going on, and there's also lots of providers which comes with I will just post it to chat, which even decouple the core JSF from the JS JavaScript widgets. So absolutely. So there is actually no limitation. But I think the common mistake, so I'm repeating myself, but there's a recurring questions I have to, is that the people just evaluate the frameworks like ice faces, prime faces, rich faces according to something, I don't know, architectural decision, whatever, without showing the actual component to the end users. And then the end users expect the impossible from the developers, and then is where the pain starts, because the poor developers have to implement something which the framework was never meant to, and they have to extend the components, which is beginning of the end. So I think with JSF, just use HTML5. How it's called, HTML5 friendly markup. Search for this. This is perfect. You can do whatever you like. This is a plain HTML5 code. Or if you commit to a component vendor, just stick with it and don't even try to extend the components. I would buy support and just buy the extensions from the vendor and not implement this by yourself. This is how JSF was always meant to. So the question number 7 is interested, and I had some similar problems in the past. I think even 10 years ago with the old EEGB 2. Sorry, container managed persistence 2. And I wrote a post a while ago why it's impossible to automatically handle optimistic log exceptions. And someone asked me what if there are different tables. And the problem with tables is I just will not directly answer the question, because you will see in a second it's really almost impossible to answer the question. So how JPA and most of the persistence frameworks behave is somehow interesting. So what happens is they look at a table which fields are changing, and of course foreign key is such a field. So which side of the relation is changed depends where you put the foreign key in one-to-one relations, for instance. So if you put the key on the wrong side, the changes are not going to be detected. In one-to-many relations, there is actually no choice where to put the foreign key, but it is actually changed on the wrong side, which is also funny. Not funny. It caused some trouble in the past. So be careful with optimistic log exceptions and relations. They probably don't work as you expect. So write some tests. So this is why it's almost impossible to answer the question. And of course, yeah, because what you would do, what you will have to do is you will have to model the relation as a table itself, and then you can do whatever you like. So you can say, okay, whether the relation is consistent or not, right? But it happens a lot in Java 7. We have orphan relations and stuff like this. It was not accessible before. So it is. I think the question is not answered. It cannot be answered. But I hope you are aware right now of some problems. By the way, don't panic. We have 2 questions to go, but we have lots of comments in the GIST. So I will just switch to GIST after we're done with this and to walk through the comments right now. Because the last time I forgot some questions to answer, so I would do it right now. Can you share some updates on how to do availability JE apps in light of J7 and tackling session stored data? And this is easy question to answer, because what we do at the AirHacks, at the regular AirHacks event at Munich Airport, we discuss exactly this. And what my suggestion is to turn off session clustering and stateful session bin clustering, because it is actually impossible to find the right strategy. So either the session is going to be replicated synchronously, and will be slow, or asynchronously, which is fast but not consistent. So whatever you do, you will actually lose. And actually, you should not rely that the session is persistent. So you should consider a session as a cache, not as a persistent store. If you model the application that way, you will never have problems with session. And what I do in my commercial project, I try to make my clients aware that if the application server dies, the session is lost and all the users will have to relog in, which is usually not a problem. So we had an interesting discussion at Airport Munich. There were some cases where it was not viable to do this, because it happens all the time, microservices. So in this particular case, you should store the session probably in the database or in memory grid or somewhere. And this actually, there are some possibilities, like, for instance, GSR 107 Jcache is perfectly suitable for this, or you use Hazelcast or whatever. But there's always the problem that if you cannot distribute the cache in a scalable and scalable, consistent, and performant way. It would be a miracle. So I hope the basic questions are covered. So I will switch to GIST and then switch back to my comments, but because this is the right order. So someone asked me, so this is Alukan, was really asked me several times the question about, actually this question about view scoped and request scoped, and I thought I answered the question the last time, but I didn't. So I will try to I did some research actually. So, and the request scope question. So in GSR, so what do you have to know? In Java 7, request scoped in GSF is actually a request scoped in CDI. And it is clearly defined. So the question was when it starts and when it ends, request scoped and view scoped. And the definition of request scoped is it starts, so the service method of a servlet happens already in the to filter and service. In do filter and service, the scope is already active. So what it actually means, if you inject a request scope bean to a filter or service method of or service on a servlet within the service, and so do get in the post method of any servlet, request scope will work. What it means in turn in GSF, the whole faces servlet is enclosed in request scoped. So if you would change the source code of the faces servlet, you could inject to the faces servlet your request beans, and according to the specification, it should work. If it doesn't, the application server has a bug, but it should. And so what it actually means, request scope clearly defined and fully encloses all the Java-E HTTP-based components, and so servlets and filters. So whatever framework you are using, you can rely that within your servlet and filter, all request scoped is active. So the view scoped is defined a little bit differently. And so what it actually means, the view scoped is active within a single view ID. So when the navigation handler changes, so if the method navigation handler handle navigation and the view ID changes after the invocation, the view scope is no more active. So what it actually means is that the view scope remains active within a view. If you swap to another view, it is no more active. And this is defined that with the navigation handler. So it's clearly defined, and this is the Java doc for this. So I can put the Java doc to chat, and I think I answered the question clearly. If not, ask me now. Otherwise, I will close the question. I will never, ever talk about this. Okay. I think perfect. Now, Makum C1. This is, I got lots of emails from him, and this is actually a really nice guy. And what I just did, there was some discussion and just pasted the whole discussion to the wiki. So it's not like he doesn't like Java E, in contrary. So he just was curious what I'm saying about. So, and this was some objections to JSF and Java E. I will just try to digest the question and answer the questions on the fly. So JSF is a component and event-based MVC framework, not a request-based MVC framework. So and there's a JSF was not successful because it tried to attempted to abstract away HTML, CSS, and HTTP with components. Again, it tried. This was JSF 1.1. It was like 10 years ago, but this is no more the case. So if you're using Java 7 or Java 6, you could still try to abstract if you use components, or you can just stick with plain HTML5. So nothing will be abstracted. And yeah. And component-based framework is not good for large form-based app. This is what I don't get, because it's particularly good for large-based, and I think it's not component-based, but it occurred to me that I saw some session at Java 1 this year that eBay is using JSF, and I would say eBay is somehow large, but not form-based. And there are lots of projects using JSF successfully. The problem is always if you're using a component framework and the component framework does not fit your need, then you are in trouble, because then you have to understand the component framework, HTML markup, and CSS and everything. So the JSF generates garbage tables. This is not true. It really depends which components you are using. And designer doesn't have to know what JSF is doing. So it is really, of course, there are component frameworks who are generating table-based design. So if you're using this, I mean, then it would be wrong. It's like saying, you know, there are probably some Swing component-based frameworks which you can buy, and you can find a crappy one. And you can say, okay, Swing or JavaFX are crappy because there's one framework which doesn't behave, right? So what is generated, it really depends on your framework. And oh, we have some feedback. Let's see what happens. So nothing. Okay, that was just as a discussion. We can use JavaScript framework independently with JSF. So we did it a lot. Why not? You can always do this. I mean, there is no. You can always do this. Again, if you're using, if you bought a component framework for JSF, and this component framework uses a lot of JavaScript, let's say jQuery or whatever, it could collide with your JavaScript, of course. But if you are just using JSF out of the box, there will be no collisions. And Spring MVC scalability is higher than JSF? Probably. I mean, you could try to use JSF. Yeah, you cannot compare it, because I could then argue point 3 would be plain JSPs are higher scalable than Spring MVC for sure. They scale like crazy. But if you would just use static page generator, which actually I implemented in NAS one, a static page generator will outperform everything. But if you would write your HTTP server with assembler, it will be the fastest one, right? So this is always, you know, a trade-off between the usability, maintainability, and performance. So Spring MVC is scalable over JSF. So I would say someone likes Spring MVC more than JSF. So if you like it more, then use it. Okay. Then problem EEGB 3 to EE7. High-level transaction, Spring is better than EEGB. I would say almost no difference. So I mean, in EEGBs there's declarative transaction and bin managed transactions. Bin managed transactions are very flexible, but mostly not needed. And I don't even use the declarative transactions EGB. I just stick with the default. A few years ago, I used the requires new. Right now, I just don't use anything, and it works out of the box. Actually, in code reviews, I search actively for transactions. If I find something which has in transaction as a keyword, I consider it a defect. So I never miss anything. But if you miss something, we probably get EGB 3.3 in Java 8, so we could fix this. So if you know key points, why not? Inheritance support, EGB does not support inheritance, but Spring supports this. Of course, EGB would support inheritance, but with the injection it would be a little bit weird. What happens then? By the way, CDI does support inheritance, but I cannot remember when I use it. So inheritance for service object is widely overused. And I would just get rid of inheritance altogether if you have rather boring financial apps. In object-oriented world, it will be a little bit different, but EGBs are not objects, are services or utility classes. So I think it's more important that JPA supports inheritance, not Spring or EGBs. Declarative transactions, I would argue EGBs are very good. So actually too good. So we actually don't need this. EGB doesn't run on lightweight web server like Tomcat. So what we started, we whitelight 8.1 with deployed application without any tuning. What was it? 107 megabyte RAM. The difference between plain Tomcat and Tommy or whitefly is about 30 megs. I actually delivered a talk, I think it was GeekCon or 33 Degrees conference a few years ago, and compared all the servers. I think RAM is no more issue. So the difference between Pivotal and Tommy would be, let's say, adverse, right? 100 megs RAM. But if you try to buy 100 megs RAM, I don't even will spend €1 on this. I mean, it really doesn't matter, except you're building a cloud, right? So deployment issue is often challenging with the older specs. The newer specs is actually absolutely not challenging. It works really well. So we deployed the applications on Whitefly and Glassfish, from Glassfish to Whitefly, and it really worked. What is challenging is not EGBs, it's the persistence. But Spring doesn't fix this because Spring doesn't come with own persistence except Spring data. But not like there is no, I'm not aware of something like JPA implementation of Spring. So easier, interceptors, implementation of Spring is more easier. It cannot be any easier. I mean, just look on my YouTube. I don't know whether I recorded a screencast. If not, I will record one. I think it is possible to create an interceptor in 1 minute. Spring is more powerful. This is true, but easier. I mean, in Java E we have interceptors and you are done. So actually, one annotation. You have to know one annotation. And EGB not support all servers. This is what I don't get. Actually, of course, EGBs are run on all application servers. Okay. So we covered the too many thing the last time already. So I will skip the question. So or short answer is, I try to answer everything, right? So the short answer is one too many. So I would just use one too many. If there are any problems, then I will find for solution. But I would never actually start with the workaround. So write some tests, write simple code. If you bump to some problems, then do something about this, but never start with a workaround. This would be my my suggestions. You can see some nice comments too about Spring. So yeah, this is what I see in Java 7 is lean. It's actually extremely lean. This is actually my perception. So by the way, my Docker container, their server is Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it boots so fast that you don't even see the progress bar. So probably with Spring or Juice, whatever, it will start even faster. But I mean, whether it starts 2 seconds fast or not, I really don't care anymore. It's just really crazy fast, and the whole deployment is fast. So I'm doing, I'm implementing right now some Angular applications. What's funny is the Java EE deployment and start is way faster of the backend than running a karma test or build for the front end. So it's actually really funny, and no one complains about this, right? So, yeah. So the question is, it's like Java EE is not easy enough for security, and I have actually completely different point of view, of course. So if you search for Java magazine, I wrote an article about this magazine, Adam Bean and security. you will probably find an article. Yes, authentication authorization. I will just paste it to the chat. Okay, so Thomas wrote that I will visit the Gdańsk Java user group. Yeah, I will do in December. I forgot the date, but it will be December. So if you like, we can meet us there. So, I will just misuse the already created project to explain you the basic principle of the article. So what you can do is the following. Let's say, oh, nice name, principal extender. My principal produces. This is the and I'm injecting here the actual principal. So, and this is just a class. And this is, I will just create the class, not here. So, and this class has a name and a list of, I don't know, entitlements or something like this. So, and now it comes the following observation. Principal get name is unique. So if it is unique, I use it as a lookup, go to my own database, it's JPA, NoSQL, whatever, fetch whatever I like and expose it as my principal, and it's injectable everywhere. Combining with a very simple interceptor, I can create a really powerful security in minutes. And this is what we did in all the projects, as it was more than sufficient. And before this, I was asked about crazy frameworks to use, and this is actually what we always did, because usually the authentication and authorization are separated. So authentication is in the in the corporate realm, and the authorization needs to be flexible, and this is what we actually implemented. And just read the article. So this is if you have time, this is what I try to show, because I did it. This was a few years ago the most asked questions. Right now it comes back, but it is I think Java 6 and Java 7 handles really well. Something like a Spring Secure and the others are better, in integrating with OAuth and all the legacy, the surrounding infrastructure. But from the power, Java 6 and Java 7 are just good enough. So there's actually no issue, or in my eyes. If it is, then just ask me right now, so we can go over this. And okay, so this was the last question here, and then let's go through the comments. How to implement an MVC using JAX-RS as the controller? I would never use this because in Java 8 we'll get a dedicated MVC framework, which MVC spec, model view controller spec, with reference implementation. And if you like MVC, just look at VRaptor. We discussed it briefly at the recent AirHacks as well. So look at the VRaptor. This is a nice MVC framework, just completely based on CDI and really lean, no configuration, no XML, just pure MVC. So VRaptor. OpenJPA versus Hibernate and versus Eclipselink. Hibernate was the leader, and what is funny, a few years ago, as I started to introduce Glassfish V1 and V2 to the enterprises, everyone was afraid of Eclipselink. What do you have to know? Eclipselink is based on Toplink, and Toplink was implemented in Smalltalk. It's actually older than Java, so there's lots of mature code there, and it was ported to Java. It is one of the oldest JPA or persistence frameworks. So Hibernate and Eclipselink, I would say Eclipselink is crazy fast, and Hibernate as well. So it's really hard to compare them. There are some specs out there which show that Eclipselink is faster, but if you use Hibernate with OGM, it could be a little bit faster. It's really hard to say. What is funny right now? So people really like Eclipselink, and if they move away from Glassfish V4 to Whitefly, they take sometimes Eclipselink because of the nice error messages. So error messages seems to be an issue. I consider both as equally well, Hibernate and Eclipselink. I had some really bad experiences with OpenJPA, but it was prior to version V2. I will have to retest it with V2 and see whether it improved or not, but back then it was really bad. So we created some tests, it was terrible. So the third question, NoSQL. This is a great question. So what is preferable? Something like native drivers or extraction like JPA? And this is therefore interesting because NoSQL, it could be beneficial to have unstructured data. Let's imagine you have a RESTful endpoint and you're sending JSON objects back and forth. With with Java 8 and Lambdas, it could be really interesting or very easy to process the object on the fly. So you actually don't need a real objects, to talk to the database. You can just stick with native drivers. On the other hand, if you have object-oriented storage and you are forced to use NoSQL because of political decision or whatever, then JPA could be interesting. But for instance, in my project X-Ray, I switched from JPA to plain Hazelcast to hash maps, and I'm really happy with the decision because I don't need actually the objects. In other project, it would be impossible to switch from JPA to NoSQL because it would be never an option to use hash maps to model the business logic. So it really depends on the project, but there is no real answer to this. But I'm using a little bit. Sometimes it having just a hash map is good enough, so you not always need the full-blown ORM mapper to store a view data to pieces of data to the backend. And sometimes it could be also interesting to use something completely different like graph-oriented stores and or document databases, and then just using mapping them to JPA would be just insane. I mean, it would be way too complicated. Okay. This is interesting. You said that on boring enterprise project. I'm really curious where I said this. So I said it often. So boring enterprise project, but I would be curious where you hear this, Eyal, where I said this. So that I'm using a multi-module. I use actually a lot multi-module, and the reason for this is what I usually have is I have a monolithic project, let's say X-Ray. Then I get the system tests, X-Ray ST, and then probably UI part. So I get some completely independent projects and would like to build them. So what I do, I create an super POM, which just invokes all the projects so that I can build them completely one after another. This is what I usually do, but this is not like I'm using this because of modularization. I'm using this because of laziness. I would like to build everything together. So this is even more interesting question. So this is from Matthias. And the question is microservice and RESTful communications. So I think we cannot answer the question right now, but I will try. So what to do with the API? And we spent, I think, at the airhacks, I don't know whether there are some prior airhackers on the air right now. So I think the most discussed topic is this and type-safe versus fluent APIs. How to deal with the API. And I would say you have two possibilities. You can say, I have not type-safe API and I'm exposing the API to the clients, but I'm really ensuring the backward compatibility with lots of tests. So in this case, I wouldn't expose anything to the client. So the client will be in charge to use the API out of the box. It's really easy. And if you are using something like Angular, you don't need DTOs anyway. So what is then nice, the API is more stable. If you release the DTOs, you are in charge. The API provider is in charge of the API, and this can come with some political issues. How to deal with this? Sign-offs and stuff like this. So I think whether you will create a DTOs and which team will create the DTOs is really a political issue. Usually, the best would be if there is one API team who just cares about the REST services and the DTOs, and this is the API team, but it actually never happens in practice, right? So I tend not to create DTOs. I just create REST APIs, and that is. And if the REST APIs are good, there's actually no problem to map to the APIs. Also, an interesting statement: I tend to use more and more plain JSON without having any the possibility to use XML, and this works better and better. Actually, so better and better. It works really fine. So in this particular case, I don't need DTOs at all because I have the JSON API, and the JSON API from Java 7 are actually DTOs. One question, very simple one: where to put the business logic operation database where we can use in project both JAX2RS and JSF? So very, very simple answer: in boundary. So we have the boundary, which contains the this actually facade, and the business logic can be in controls or in the boundary. And the JAX2RS is just an exposer. It exposes the boundary via RESTful web services. This is actually what happens. And yeah, this is the answer. And we talk a lot about entity control boundary, so it should be clear what to do. Just search for entity control boundary, my name, and probably EHEX, and we should see lots of material. And by the way, and in the last 2 years, I help a lot of different startup companies. And I always we use ECB a lot, and I ask them, what is your experience with ECB? And they really like it. So it's like, okay, this is very clear and simple pattern. It just works. So this was their response, which I really appreciate. So Robert, my old friend, ask, and this is actually, I will have to do some research. I have no time to look at this, but the question is how to expose JNDI services from a JCA adapter. What I did once, and actually is described in the green book here, this initial context is a method called rebind, and you could expose whatever you liked using referenceable. So there is a JNDI interface, I think it's called referenceable, and it worked on Glassfish. But I have no idea what is actually the common way to expose objects via JNDI. So from JCA 1.6 connector. So I will have to look at the specification. So I cannot answer the question right now whether there's a standard way to do so, and but just try with initial context. I think it's called rebind, and I would put it in the class which starts the connector. I think it is adapter. The class which implements the adapter is the first class, and you could at the boot time try to expose your stuff to the connector. Okay, I think we covered lots of ground, and there is one interesting internal story. So there is a new page called EHEX TV. So I will go to EHEX TV. So this is where you probably see me live right now. So this would be interesting. Oh, decoupling. So, and this all the archives. So this is the page of EHEX TV, and EHEX.io is going to be repurposed to something else. As you can see, I'm just in the uploading some stuff here, and what it is the first part of the Bootstrap Online. So this would be the online course. Soon, in a few at most few weeks, and yeah. So this is what I actually exactly 1 hour. I never thought it would be possible. Do you have any questions from the chat or Twitter? If not, see you in winter. No questions. No questions. See you in December. And by the way, also forgotten, I scheduled the shows until 2015. So August. So you can, if you like, you can have also to register myself here. You are going to be notified about the progress. So thank you for watching, and see you in one of our upcoming conferences, workshops, EHEX, Munich Airport. So in December there are lots of registration already, and I will also continue these special days next year. Microservices workshop, lots of registrations. So where is the page? Workshops. So the microservice, lots of registrations. Actually, everything is full. So if you like to attend, do it soon, because I think we will close the registration earlier because we get too many registrations. So thank you for watching and see you in December. Bye.